Hi everyone, sorry for that hitch. And hopefully we figured ourselves out and you're going to hear us without too much echo or too much reverberation with clarity, right? So waiting for Himani to join us and there we go. So we're here today to talk about sleep and all things related to sleep with your toddler. And we have sleep expert Himani joining us for this conversation. Um,
Hi, hi Megha. How's the sound on the two different devices? Is it okay?
I think it's working for me, and I think if you can also hear the feedback, and everyone who signed in, if you think that there's an issue, please do let us know, and we'll try
Yeah,
to.
that would be great. If you could let us know both on Facebook and on Instagram, you know, if the sound is okay, that would be great.
Great. So while we're breaking barriers of technology and trying to be on Facebook and Instagram at the same time, we also want to break barriers between these waking and sleeping hours that seem to be the greatest issue of every parent. I just got off a call with parents of children who are 17, 15, and 9. And the parting part, the last part of our session was, okay, now can you tell me how to get my 9-year-old out of bed, out of my bed?
Right, right, right.
So even after being such veterans and
Yeah,
knowing, and the bigger issue is that the 17-year-old is not around. So you know you're going to deal with that, and you're still in this rush for sleep.
right,
Just seems to be this never ending battle, right?
right, 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 right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that it's sleep is the thing that nobody talks about, but is it's one of those things that before you become a parent, I mean, yeah, you see the occasional meme, or hear the occasional joke about how sleep deprived you're going to be, but you don't actually realize how important sleep is, and actually, because half your life is actually spent sleeping, and it doesn't just happen. I mean, for a baby, 2/3 of their day is spent sleeping, and it doesn't just happen. So it's actually like a major thing, which is something I realized after I became a parent, and that sent me down this rabbit hole of learning more about sleep and the science of sleep. And in fact, not just for babies, there's a lot of really path-breaking research that's being done about adult sleep as well, and how important it is. Um, uh, but, similarly, like sleep is developmentally vital for babies. We tend to spend a lot of time thinking about food and feeding, and we kind of assume that sleep will just happen. But then that's not the case. And sleep is extremely important for several areas of growth and development. And so it's good to just be mindful about it, it's good to just be mindful about it, to educate yourself and practice what I call sleep parenting, which means that parenting doesn't end once the child goes to sleep. You continue to parent. Parenting is a 24/7 job. So you continue to parent after the baby is asleep as well.
Can
Yeah.
we talk a little bit more about that? That's sounding like a very interesting concept of continuing to parent even after
Right.
the baby has gone to bed.
Right. So, we sort of assume that a baby will fall asleep when a baby is tired. So I usually advise parents, with children age 0 to 5 years, right? Because after that, sleep is quite mature. It's more adult-like, so it's a different ball game. But when you're talking about 0 to 5-year-olds, sleep is actually still developing, and it needs parenting. So, like with every area of having a baby or a toddler, You have, you're helping your baby feed, whether it's breast or bottle or solid food. You're carrying your baby around, you're changing your baby, you're changing diapers, you're changing clothes, you're like playing with your baby, you're teaching your baby. In every aspect, you're actually parenting your baby. But when it comes to sleeping, you expect that you just put your baby down and the baby's just going to sleep and not going to need you anymore. So there's a fallacy here, right? A baby who is dependent on you for everything continues to be dependent on you once the baby is asleep, right? So there are several things to look into. Firstly, a baby can't fall asleep on her own. They don't have that ability. So just the way they can't eat on their own, they can't fall asleep on their own, or rather, they need to be soothed. They can, of course, fall asleep. That final thing they can do, but they need to be soothed. Babies, when they're tired, they don't just fall asleep. They keep going like little energizer bunnies, and they get overtired. And this concept of overtiredness is really important for parents to understand, because what happens when we're overtired, it happens to us as well, is that our bodies produce a stress hormone called cortisol. And that cortisol acts like a shot of caffeine, because it's the body's survival mechanism, right? So if the body says, okay, sleep is not coming, what do I do? Okay, I'm going to jerk myself awake with cortisol, right? Now that cortisol remains in the body, and keeps disturbing the sleep even when you want to sleep or even when you are asleep, right? So this happens with babies. So if a baby, uh, you know is say 6 months old and should be sleeping every 2 hours, right? The baby is actually going to show you some cues around that time, right? And that is the point at which you need to pick up your baby and nurse your baby or rock your baby or soothe your baby to sleep in some way. If you miss the boat on that, the baby's body is going to fill with cortisol, and now sleep is going to be disturbed. So baby is going to resist sleep, wake up quickly from naps, have disturbed naps, be cranky, not sleep well at night, right? So this is one element of sleep parenting: observing for sleep cues, knowing your baby's awake windows, soothing your baby to sleep at the right time. And then once your baby is asleep, again, the job is not over. You need to help your baby to stay asleep. So in the early,
Sorry,
so
if
for
you could just
example,
pause because I think
yeah.
there's a network issue.
All okay? Yeah. So, once the baby is asleep as well, the baby needs our support. Because especially in the first year, babies are very dependent. Human babies are born at a very dependent stage. The gestation period for a human baby, the pregnancy is quite short, right? And so when the baby comes out, the baby's still very dependent, and babies sleep best with physical contact to a caregiver, right? They need that warmth and security. So very often babies actually need to be held for their daytime naps, and they wake up if you put them down. Similarly, they sleep well if they're actually bed sharing with a parent. And there's a lot of research that's been done about how their oxygenation and their stress absorption and their calories and a lot of the regulatory systems actually work better if they're sleeping very close to their mother, uh, or other primary caregiver, right? And similarly for naps, right? Now, naps are really important, so there's this myth that if you keep your baby awake through the day, your baby is going to sleep better at night. Oh my gosh, like this is the opposite of the truth. Your baby needs to take proper age appropriate naps, right? So it helps to kind of look, all of this, it sounds like it's theory, and yes, there is a lot of research done on it. But if you really observe your baby will actually tell you everything, right? So everything is
Absolutely.
there to be seen,
Yeah.
right?
I think we need to just recap what you have said because it's so important and it's so
Right.
essential, and we don't realize so much of it, right? When you're saying that, first of all, your parenting job doesn't end when the baby is sleeping. So we're continuing to parenting. So parenting is a continuum.
Yeah.
Secondly, when you're talking about that release of cortisol, that
Yeah.
recognition that a tired baby is not a baby who will sleep. A tired baby is actually a baby who's going to be wired and who's going to struggle to sleep. Just like we do. I mean, I know for a fact that if my regular bedtime is say 10:30, 11, and I'm at a friend's, I don't know, get together, and it's 10:30, 11, and I'm yawning and I'm like, nudging my husband, it's time for us to go home. I'm sleepy, and the friends are like, no, 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 you gotta hang out, you gotta hang out.
Yeah.
And you're there till 12, 12:30, and now I come home and it's 1 in the morning and I'm wide awake. I can't sleep. And it's not that I'm not tired, I'm born tired, but it's just the
Yeah.
cortisol has flooded my
Yeah.
system and it's not making sleep possible, and then we have to utilize various ways to help us to sleep. And babies brains work like that, and they don't necessarily have the ability we have as adults to bridge this. For them it's harder to
Yeah.
get that sleep and normalize their cycle. And then what you talked about, the developmental piece of it, that it's got to be appropriate to their development. It's got to be appropriate to where they are and what they need, right? Which is again such an important
Yeah.
piece that we don't realize. Himani, there's a little bit of sound feedback. If I could recommend, if you could put the volume completely low on the device you're not using the headphones with, it helps. That's what I have done. So there's no feedback getting picked up. Um, yeah. Yes, it's gone.
Okay.
It's gone. It's
Yeah.
gone.
Gone. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I hope the audio is still there. I'm,
It's
there are
perfectly
lots
there.
of
I can
devices
hear
with
you.
lots of mics and speakers. So let's just, all
It's
right.
an experiment,
Um,
just like we're working with sleep as an experiment.
right,
So,
right, right.
yes, there's
Okay.
a lot
Although
of
now I
theory
can't hear
out
you.
there.
Hang on.
You can't hear me?
Yeah. Okay. Now I can. Yeah, so I think I'm
Okay,
okay.
great. Yeah. So, just like we're saying, sleep is also an experiment. There's a lot of theory out there, but end of the day, you have to tweak with your child to see where your child is, to meet your child where they are, and figure out what is the best way to go forward at that point. And we have to keep revisiting this, right? Based on our child's needs and on our child's developmental stages.
Right, right, right. Absolutely. So that's the thing, right? So there is this concept of awake windows, right? Which means the amount of time that your child can actually be awake before she gets overtired, right? And this changes, and this is something that is neurologically determined. It's not about how much physical exercise your child is getting, or how much they're eating, or anything like that. It's just that, okay, a 6-month old will have an awake window of 1.5 to 2 hours. This is neurological, right? And it's determined by something called homeostatic rhythms. So sleep in the body is controlled by circadian rhythms, which is the day night clock, and homeostatic rhythms, which is called sleep pressure. So that means how much time can you be awake for before you need to sleep again, right? So for a 6-month old, so for a newborn, that period is really short. It's like 30 to 45 minutes. For a 6-month old, it will be like an hour and a half to 2 hours, right? For a 9-month old, it will be 2 to 4 hours. Um, Again, usually the time is shortest at the beginning of the day. So at 9 months, I recommend something called, it's called a ladder schedule, 2 3 4 schedule. So it works really well. Of course, it can be 5-10 minutes here or there, but it's quite beautiful how mathematically it works, because if you do the first nap 2 hours after the baby wakes up in the morning, then you do the second nap 3 hours after the baby wakes from the first nap, and you do bedtime 4 hours after the baby wakes from the second nap, you have a pretty well rested baby with the right awake windows, right? And similarly, so once you have a toddler, it could be 5 hours, that awake window. But it helps to know them, and then to observe your baby, and there are some clear signs that your baby will give you. And if you kind of educate yourself about all of this, it's very easy to meet your child's needs where sleep is concerned. right? It's very easy to ensure that they're not overtired.
I think that's also again what you're saying is this is mathematical, it is
Yeah,
scientific, and we need to understand it to know where to meet our child and how to meet them based on their age and development. And
yeah,
can we also say that while we're saying this is about their age development, we also have to keep in mind things like neurodiversity, any emotional things that your child might be going through, some sort of a trauma they might be exploring, any of the other stuff which would impact, because end of the day this is about managing the hormones that are getting secreted in the body, right? So we
right.
don't want to go with these hard definitions. It's about looking at the recommendation, trying it out, seeing what the result is coming, and then revisiting, and sort of like a cyclical relationship
Yeah,
between the two to find the right rhythm for you and
yeah,
your child, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely, especially if there is, if you're dealing with a neurodiverse case, then there are several factors that need to be considered, right? Okay, so there's some feedback that there's too much feedback noise. Is that still there?
I think it's there when I'm speaking, not when you're speaking.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Trying to figure out why that is. I
I
think
have
it's
put
because,
my volumes on zero.
yeah, yeah. I no, so when I did that, when I put it on zero, I could no longer hear you at all, which is odd. Because yeah,
Now I don't hear any feedback.
yeah,
No, it's still there.
yeah, it's still there. It's still there. So because my volumes are also on zero, I mean, my phone volume is on zero. The laptop is on my headphones, so I can't figure out why that's happening.
I think
Okay,
somebody is saying that they won't be able to watch. It's going to be saved, so you can come back and watch it whenever you want.
right, right,
You can
right,
go onto the Tree Oak India page, and it'll be available there.
right,
Let's try to make the most of it because we only have 5 7 minutes now,
right.
and what we actually really want to address through this conversation is the importance of using the help of experts, understanding the the relationship between development, neurodiversity, and sleep. And the fact that we're going to go into all of this in so much more detail at our webinar on
Yeah,
Saturday, right? So on Saturday, if you just follow the link, it's going to be there, and on the Tree Oak India page, and we will be exploring this in much more detail. So we
absolutely.
have 5 6 minutes left, Himani. Maybe we could just address any questions that people might be having, particularly regarding what we'll cover in the webinar and what they would like help and support with. We can address that.
Yes, sure, sure. There's a request for a contact number. You can just DM me on Instagram, or you can register for the webinar that we have on Saturday. Whatever suits you. I think that would be the easiest. Um, and yeah, if we have any questions, that would be fine as well. Mm.
So we have a question. What is the typical sleep schedule for a 3-year-old?
So a 3-year-old is usually still napping. Toddlers drop their naps between 3 and 5 years. And three is still on the early side. So if your baby is napping, then the schedule would be that the nap would be about 5 hours after the baby wakes in the morning. It's really important to do that nap early. Otherwise, it's going to interfere with bedtime, and that just kind of messes up the whole cycle. So I would say to do that the nap should be 5 hours after the child wakes in the morning. It should be around 2 hours long, 2 to 2.5 hours, and bedtime should be 6.5 hours after that. If the baby is not napping, then the baby should sleep 12 hours at night. So again, the way to manage that would be to see what is the time that your child usually wakes up in the morning, because their morning wake up time is usually quite fixed, and it's not something that we have much control over. Because if the baby's up at 7:30, you can't be like, no, you keep sleeping till 9. That's not going to happen. So then what you need to do is you need to have an early enough bedtime. So if your baby is waking up at 7:30 a.m., then you need to ensure that they're asleep at 7:30 p.m. so that they get the 12 hours of sleep if they're not napping. So that's usually what it would be for a 3-year-old.
And
Um,
tell me, keeping in mind now that we're talking about that particular age group, what if I'm doing these 2 hour naps and
yeah.
my child is not able to sleep at night, is getting wired, is struggling, it's taking more than 45 minutes to even an hour to have my child go to sleep at night? What do I do then?
So, see, there are some clear signs that the child will give you that she's ready to drop the nap, right? Or that the nap is not working for her. So, one of those could be having, a very delayed and prolonged bedtime. It could be having an active night waking where the child wakes up at night and is not able to go back to sleep, or having a very early waking, or really, really resisting the nap, right? Or taking a very short nap no matter what you do. Uh, but I would say that, there are lots of factors to consider because, for example, there can be other causes to that. So we first need to rule out those other causes and then be sure that the child is actually ready to drop the nap, right? So, for example, the nap could be too late in the day, right? So if because especially here in India, we have this idea that the nap should be after lunch, so we very often do like a 2 p.m. nap. Now that is going to mess up bedtime big time. If the nap needs to be earlier in the day, and then there won't be that resistance. Secondly, we need to make sure the child is not overtired. Third, and therefore resisting sleep. Thirdly, we need to ensure that the method of soothing that we're using at bedtime is correct, right? So, some children find it very difficult to unwind just lying down. So if we're just, especially like a 2.5-year-old, even a 3-year-old, they don't have much impulse control, and they find it very difficult to stay still. So yes, okay, if they're still, you're rubbing their back, they're able to stay still, you can play some music, it might work. You might actually need to hold them against you and rock back and forth, or you may need to just hold them against you and walk back and forth in the room with music playing. So it's also about the method of soothing. Some 3-year-olds are still nursing, so if you're nursing them to sleep, that might work, right? So but so one also needs to troubleshoot that, like how are you actually soothing the child to sleep, right? So if all of okay, also, do you have any light? Some people have a night light on at that time, which is very stimulating for a toddler, to be able to see things around. There are other situations where, there isn't a very solid bedtime routine, or the toddler keeps running out of the room, which becomes like a hard reset, every time the toddler leaves the room. So as long as all of that is in place, and that this is not the reason that the child is resisting bedtime, then it might be time to drop that nap, right? But it's just that we need to ensure that all of this other stuff is in place. And to answer Divya's question, you should not make them drop a nap. You have to be sure that they're giving you the signals that they are ready to drop the nap. Because naps are very important. Toddlers at this age find it difficult to stay up for 12 hours straight. They do get tired, they do get wired, and it affects everything because again, even learning, for example, there's so much research that has been done that talks about how important that napping for babies and toddlers, age appropriate napping, because it's during that daytime nap that a lot of memory consolidation happens. So a lot of the things that they learn, there are studies that have been done that show that, even preschoolers who take a nap retain their learning from the first half and from the second half of the day much better than a preschooler who doesn't nap, right? So plus it can be really hard for them, like they're actually physically exhausted by the time it's 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. and if they haven't napped, right? They won't eat well, they'll be cranky, there'll be behavioral challenges, all of that. So it's a complicated issue, I would say. You need to be really sure. And there can be a transition period of 6 months where the toddler is napping on some days and not on other days. And that's fine too. It's okay to go with that. And then finally, they drop the nap once and for all.
So sounds like there's a lot of things that one needs to keep in mind. There's a lot of work that one needs to do to ensure this is the right thing for their child. And I think we want to have a more concentrated conversation with a lot more information and time to unpack this. And I urge you all with these concerns and questions to join us on Saturday for this webinar, because there we're going to get into the nitty gritties of this. We're going to get into the tables. We're going to lay it out, and we're going to help you figure out where your child needs to be, and you need to be able to support them and manage these chemicals and these wake windows and sleep time. So thank you,
Absolutely.
Himani.
Yes. Looking
Thank
forward
you,
to that.
and
Thank you, Megha.
looking
Yeah.
forward to our Saturday webinar, and hope more people join us.
Yes.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye bye.